Right. Hello. Good evening. Welcome everybody. I think we might be a couple of minutes late starting, which I can say is all my fault. Apologies. But welcome. Welcome to Stowe Talks. Tonight's session, as you know, because you've put your names down for tonight's session, is recognizing and dealing with economic abuse. Okay. Now we know that money and a person's financial situation is one of the most frightening aspects when a relationship breaks down. Money impacts everything, and it's a very common way for an abuser to control their victim, especially in a domestic situation. Now, we're not really talking about financial settlements upon divorce tonight, though we will touch on some of the legal aspects of it. We're talking just about the economic abuse mainly. Now, this covers a wide range of behaviours. It can cover things such as restricting a person's access to money, obviously the most obvious one, but also restricting a person's access to their ability to go out to work and secure employment. A person might find themselves restricted in their ability to buy groceries for the family, buy household items and food. They may not have access to their own bank accounts or any bank accounts. An abuser may also steal. They may take your wages. They may build up debt in your name. So the ramifications as well of economic abuse are wide ranging, and it can leave a victim feeling trapped, feeling confused. But ultimately, it leaves the victim 100% dependent on their abuser. Now, we've talked about domestic abuse on several occasions in the past, and it's a conversation that we are carrying on, obviously. It's a very important one. But we do think here that economic abuse deserves a deeper dive, and especially with people who know a lot about it. Now, our guest tonight is Ceri Griffiths. Now, Ceri is a financial planner. And obviously we've not met financial planners before, but she specialises in divorce, which makes her pretty cool. Now, Ceri is passionate about helping women in particular, and women in particular who need support in this area. So what are we going to cover tonight? Tonight we're going to cover a lot of basics. We're going to cover what is economic abuse, perhaps the most important element, what are the signs, what are the red flags that you need to be looking out for. How can you manage, how can you deal with the abuse? But also what support's available from family, from friends, from professionals. Inevitably, it's going to be opening up quite a few questions tonight, and that's what we're here for as well. Obviously, me and Ceri are here to help with any questions that you might have. Our goal really tonight is to help you understand and recognise the signs of financial abuse, as I say, and how to get support. For anyone currently in financial proceedings concerning their divorce, just as a side note, one of my team has actually written an article on how economic abuse impacts divorce. Yes, economic abuse is, well, it was and still is obviously included within the definition of domestic abuse in the Domestic Abuse Act from 2021. For those who are particularly up in this area, there was also a case called DP and EP, which helped to broaden the definition of conduct within financial proceedings, and that has helped our develop the law in this area and how the courts treat domestic abuse. However, that comes with the caveat that within proceedings, obviously, what we call the evidential threshold in order to succeed with conduct arguments is very high still. I won't get into a to-do about that here, obviously. We're looking for a much more practical session tonight, but the law may well change a bit going forwards, obviously. As I say, tonight is dealing with the more practical elements of what it is and how to spot it. Housekeeping, that's what I need to do, isn't it? Before we start our presentation. Now, to be clear, obviously, we're not giving any financial advice. You should always seek independent advice regarding your specific financial circumstances. Welcome to any new listeners that we have. We might have some of Ceri's followers on here. Welcome back to old friends. It's likely you've registered with us because you've got an interest in this topic. You might be someone who's been a victim. You might be someone who's going through law school. That's great. You might have had a different type of personal experience, or you might be supporting somebody who's going through this, someone who's recently had a breakup, for example. Now, we welcome you in whatever capacity you are with us here tonight. We're going to be recording tonight's session, as always. For questions, please use the Q&A function you'll see on Zoom in the top right-hand corner. You've got the Q&A section. Please drop your questions in there and we'll try and get to them, obviously. This is a safe space for people to listen and ask questions and also make comments. That's not a problem, that's great. So please use the chat function, but obviously be respectful and kind to each other, as I know you always are. Where else am I going with this? Feedback. That's the last aspect I tend to ask for, isn't it? The content of our sessions is obviously driven by what you, as our listeners, I suppose, would like to hear. So let us know what you think about this session. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about, and we'll go from there. But really, you're here to hear from Ceri. So without further ado, can you hear me, Ceri? You okay?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. There are some comments saying that people can't hear, so it'd be good to know if it's just one or two. Can anybody hear us? Would be useful to know actually in the comments.
Oh, I wonder. I hope that's not my sound here. I am up in Yorkshire. Kate, we do.
Everyone can hear fine. We're good. We'll carry on then. So
Cool.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so nice to be here, and I'm really looking forward to giving some insights and actually providing a platform for some questions as well, because I know that it can be so difficult to get hold of the right people to ask these questions to. I do have a presentation, but it's really flexible. We can jump off that and actually discuss things in a bit more detail if we need to. But Sarah, shall I go ahead and share that presentation and I'll work my way through there?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Awesome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm hoping you're all seeing my screen just now. Is it still loading? Give me a thumbs up, Kate, if you can see it. Yay, fabulous. So understanding economic abuse. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background to me, because I know that there are many of you here who won't know who I am, but also those who do know who I am. I want to just give some reassurance to the scope of what I'm covering, because I am a financial planner, but I work exclusively with women divorcing CEOs and millionaires. So a very specific group of people. Today's presentation is more general. I'm talking about economic abuse as it might hit anybody, not just the specific clients that I work with. I have been a financial advisor for over 20 years. I'm chartered and fellow, so that's the highest level of qualification I can have as a financial planner, but I also hold financial abuse and narcissism qualifications, hence my interest in economic abuse. I am part of Resolution's working party on economic abuse. Resolution are a group of lawyers and other divorce financial professionals who aim to work in really collaborative ways. And the working party specifically that I'm part of, we are looking at economic abuse and creating enough insight and direction to be able to get a judicial review. Because as Sarah discussed earlier, it is really still quite difficult to use and to position what has happened to you if you have suffered economic abuse as part of your divorce. So we're trying to get some new looks and some new insights via a judicial review. And just a little bit here in terms of kind of awards that I've won. I'm trying to show you my credibility, I suppose. This is why I'm sharing this with you, so that you know that you are talking to somebody who has the right expertise and the right recognition, and that you're in really safe hands. I also want to share a couple of statistics with you. These are specifically for the type of women that I work with, but I think they're valuable to share in general, because they do give us a real insight. So there's this real difference between how women dealing with their finances feel about money, and their access to money. And they often think that men have more knowledge there. And also, there are a huge proportion of people who uncover negative surprises when they're forced to take control of their finances. So 74% of affluent and high net worth widows and divorcees report that they discover negative surprises when they're forced to take control of their surprises. I'm sharing this so that you are kinder to yourself and that you can create some grace, because one of the big things that happens to people who have experienced economic abuse or coercive control is a lack of grace, and in hindsight they can see all of the things that they did wrong. And what we need to really recognize is how difficult that would have been to see at the time. And as I go through these slides, it should become more obvious. Now, the next slide I've got here really is just going to go through the agenda. So what is economic abuse, signs and red flags, how you manage and support. And I do have a flag here, which is specifically talking about why women in financial abuse situations find themselves actually facing a lot of nervousness and kind of not feeling control of money. So this is specifically about women, because this is a slide that I use with my clients, and obviously that would be who I'd normally be talking to. But actually, this is something that would apply to anybody who is not the non-money manager within their relationship. And so I wanted to use it today because it has got a wider resonance from that perspective. And there's some things on here that I specifically want to pull out. So from a women's perspective, we do have a gender pay gap and a gender pensions gap that do mean that we often have less funds and less access to funds now and in retirement. As a non-working spouse or the non-earning or managing money spouse, the same would apply there. We also have a system where we didn't necessarily learn about money in school, and this goes for everyone, men and women. It wasn't part of our curriculum. So having that understanding and actually being able to know finances really well doesn't start from childhood with us. And the non-money manager is normally not the one who's been exposed to the money within a relationship. We often find that one party has a lack of advisor when they get to a separation, and that advisor will normally stay with the person who has been the main decision maker during a divorce. And then when we have a lot of money silence, and this is huge across all genders and demographics, where we have a situation that we don't feel comfortable talking about money in the UK. And that means that we don't often turn to friends and family, particularly if we have regrets, particularly if we're feeling that we haven't been the wisest, or we've got ourselves into a situation that we don't feel comfortable and happy with. And the way that the media talks about money can be really off-putting for a lot of people, talking about beating the market, using lots of jargon. It can just feel really inaccessible. We're trying to make decisions at a really emotional time, and it can all lead to a lot of intimidation. So there's all these barriers that can be in the way of money, even when there's not economic abuse present. But then if we move forward and talk specifically about financial abuse and economic abuse, Sarah touched on this, but I want to just get into the definitions because it is really important. So economic abuse is when one person has control over another individual's access to economic resources. And it's that economic resources part that's quite important. And it diminishes one person's ability to support themselves and forces them to depend on their perpetrator financially. And that can continue through a divorce and can actually heighten during divorce. Digging into this a little bit further, financial abuse. So we use these two terms, financial abuse, economic abuse. Financial abuse is specifically where it's illegal or unauthorized use of property or money or pensions. So this is where you probably hear more in the press about people fraudulently obtaining powers of attorney, maybe stealing money or property from older people. This is where we would see this type of abuse more commonly discussed, financial abuse. But economic abuse specifically includes the control of someone's ability to control their present or future earning by preventing them obtaining a job or education, or having the means to carry out a job or education. And I'll talk you through what that looks like in a moment, because when we go through some of the specific examples, it can really help turn on some light bulbs. It is so unbelievably prevalent. Although it's less commonly understood and discussed than physical abuse, it is massively prevalent. And it's a really powerful way of trapping somebody into an abusive relationship, because when there is economic abuse present, it diminishes somebody's ability to stay safe or survive if they leave. you basically can end up in a situation where you don't have the means or the ability to be able to move forward. And it occurs across all socioeconomic, educational, racial, and ethnic groups. So it occurs to men and women, it occurs to those in high net worth and all types of financial situations. It occurs in 99% of domestic violence cases. I find that quite alarming, 99% of domestic violence cases. And it's one of the top reasons that those who are survivors of domestic abuse state for them staying in the relationship or returning to an abusive partner. So this is important stuff. This is huge stuff. As Sarah stated, it is a legally recognised form of domestic abuse and it is defined in the Domestic Abuse Act. Oh, I've written that twice, apologies. What I should say is that I didn't produce, I produced the slides, not my PA, so apologies if they're not perfect. But I normally do this presentation to lawyers and I wanted to tweak them for you today so that they were more relevant. So some of them aren't going to be perfect, but the actual content is good. It often occurs in the context of intimate partner violence, and it's very much linked into that coercive control, not only just what money you have access to, but what you can buy. And 1 in 6 women in the UK has experienced economic abuse by a current or former partner. So it can have hugely lifelong effects. I wanted to give you an example because I think it's really difficult to necessarily understand how this type of abuse can occur. And we tend to think about it happening with people who have less autonomy and less power. And Tina Turner is a really good example of somebody who had experienced economic abuse. And a lot of people know that she was a victim of domestic abuse with Ike Turner. Her autobiography does cover this. What's really interesting is how that abuse actually extended across coercively what she was wearing, what she was doing, how she was doing it, and then into her finances as well. And it was marked in terms of her constantly having to justify what she wanted. And ultimately, she got to a place where she became suicidal. And it was the most horrific journey of somebody who had created their own financial independence but had no access to it. So this is an example really, and while I don't like to compare Tina Turner to a frog, it very much is this frog in the boiling water scenario where you are just layering gently the levels of abuse so that it doesn't become noticeable. How I often see this with my clients is that it is positioned as somebody taking care of you, positioned as a logical and a kind of a really obvious way to manage a situation is that one of you looks after the finances and the other looks after other aspects. So there's all of these really reasonable reasons that these things can start. So let's talk a little bit about how we identify some of that financial abuse. I want to say at this point that a lot of marriages run really successfully by making those logical decisions. And just because your former partner did manage the finances and had access and understanding of them doesn't necessarily mean it is financial or economic abuse. A lot of marriages work where one party is the money manager and the other one isn't. It's a layering and it's the subtleties of how it transpires over the longer term that really makes it move from just a marriage that is one that's defined by roles to one where it's something we should have more concern about. So I'm going to go through some of the red flags and I'll give you some examples of these and we'll just talk through some of these in a little bit more detail as we go through. So starting with no access to joint accounts, that's a common one when there are accounts that you have no access to, they have your name on them. Refusal to share major aspects of finances. When you're asking and you are not given the information, and when you are really direct and not given the information. It's really common in financial abuse situations for parties to be made accountable for every penny that they spend, but also for there to be double standards, so they can make your former partner can make major purchases without consulting you, but you're the one having to justify and detail everything that you're spending. And what you're spending is being monitored and noticed. Some of these are ones that you might be experiencing together, but they don't have to be. You might just have one or two of these. They are standalone. It can be really common in less high net worth instances for one party to take out credit cards and loans in the other party's name without asking permission. They can borrow money, not give it back. And then a good example around this, I had a client specifically who, a really subtle way that the money situation, the cash really showed up, was her ex would always make an excuse to get access to any cash that she had. So she was a non-working spouse. In fact, she would do projects, or she was an interior designer, and the funds always had to be paid into a joint account, and she didn't have access to that joint account. Her income was always by credit card. She had a credit card. She was allowed just to spend as she wanted on that credit card, which seems like financial freedom, but it gave him an absolute line of sight of what she was spending, and he could control the limits. And she never had access to cash. She literally had no way of actually paying for anything with cash, creating any kind of an emergency fund or a leave him fund. And one scenario she told me about was, even if she were to get money as a birthday present, for example, if her mum was to give her money for a birthday present, there would always be a reason that he'd need to spend it in really subtle ways. It wasn't so direct as, you're not allowed cash, I'm taking it. The way that this would actually transpire is he would need it for the window cleaner, or they were having a takeaway and he didn't have any cash. And she never ended up with the money herself. She had whatever the scenario was, there would always be like this absolute reason that she didn't end up with it. So while she was living this affluent life, she had no financial security. Some other really subtle ways that it shows up, and Sarah and I both touched on this, because economic abuse is also about preventing your ability to earn money or to sustain the job that you have. And one of my clients' ex would hide her car keys, and it did a number of things. It made her feel like she was crazy because she was certain that she put them in a certain place, but it constantly put her in a place of instability with work. At times she literally couldn't get there because she couldn't find these car keys, or she'd be late. And it was about creating that control. Other ways that it can transpire is, I've known exes refuse to have children on their allotted time so that their partner couldn't work, or just using children as a pawn in general, so being really inconsistent so that it's really difficult to withhold work as well. Thinking divorce specifically, where red flags can show up and where economic abuse can be present, refusing to leave the marital home. At times that can be a form of economic abuse. Insisting that you don't waste money on lawyers or financial professionals, being really insistent about what you can and can't spend money on. Non-disclosure, not wanting to supply supporting evidence, and then using the legal system like a weapon, so that they are able to really kind of use the legal system to create a scenario that makes it really difficult to you. And I'll come on to that on the next screen, actually. Often they'll set a date that they're just going to cease all payments to the family marital home, and that's it. There's going to be nothing else coming through. It can show by them providing no access to funds to pay for your legal support, where there are marital assets, where there are funds, but they refuse. But then they engage the top legal support for themselves. That can be super common. They can engage in long disputes, and they aim to diminish all your reserves. And that's one that I see most prevalently with my clients, is this desire to create a set of circumstances that mean that you end up backed in a corner because financially you no longer have the means to continue, or the emotional desire to continue in a legal battle, and I hate using that word, but in a legal battle with them. And as I said, it's the layering. It's not all of these things that need to be present. It's a combination of these different things that can be present. The impact then, how it can affect clients, if you are in a situation where you are divorcing somebody who has been financially abusive and is continuing to be during your divorce, there are huge impacts on your emotions. It is likely that there was other coercive control. It is likely that there was other abuse, and self-worth and self-confidence could be significantly low. The emotions many clients show up to me with are around fear, just absolute fear about how they are going to create some security and some stability, but also then shame, this sense of I should have known better. I don't understand why I allowed this to happen. A sense of real confusion about what has happened, because it is really subtle and it can be really clever. Going back to the Tina Turner situation and the desperation that she felt, having created so much financial independence for herself, but then being in a situation where she had no access or control of her money, or even of the work that she was then doing, because Ike actually took over her planning of her diary and what she was and wasn't doing. So this fear and shame and confusion and obvious levels of anxiety and stress. The other massive impact it has is on financial literacy, because if you have been within a relationship where gradually over time you have had less and less access to funds and to money, then the chances are that your financial literacy has taken a knock. You've not been exposed to the same decision making, and potentially even your own money decision making has been questioned, leaving you in a place where you don't know what you should know around finances. And there is often, I find, the feeling and the understanding that you have this huge mountain to climb to regain that knowledge and that understanding, which isn't true. And I'll come on to that later. But there is this definite sense of financial literacy needing to be improved. And then it can really lead to a power imbalance when one party feels money confident, money clear, has a clear line of sight, has access to funds, and the other party is in a place where they are questioning what has happened to them, still confused about what has happened, and then also doesn't have the access to the funds or the knowledge to make the decisions they need to. We end up with this real power imbalance. So let's talk a little bit about managing and dealing with the abuse, because it's so important that you're aware of kind of what is out there and what exists. I really want to encourage everyone on the call to check out this website. We will send the details later. It's called Surviving Economic Abuse. I cannot describe to you how amazing this website is. Oh, I've got a question. Oh, Kate, are you keeping an eye of the questions? Shall I just come to them at the end? Because I've had a raised hand and I don't know if there's an issue. Shall I just come to it all at the end?
Yeah, we'll come to the end. We've got some questions in the Q&A, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat.
Let's continue. So yeah, this website, Surviving Economic Abuse, it is outstanding. It is genuinely the best resource I've ever come across. When you access this website, you've got a number of options at the top, and one of them is I need help. And when you click on there, the details and the direction it will take you through is just a really sound starting place. So please have a look at that and we will share the details of that. I want to touch on really what we can do legally and kind of what our options are there, because it is massively important that the decisions you make are counter discussed with a lawyer or with a legal team, because taking certain action has legal implications. For example, closing bank accounts or making decisions to leave the marital home, all of them have a knock-on effect for your divorce. So it is super, super important that you're aware of how the things that you might need to do because of the financial abuse could impact the legal process of your divorce. So legal advice is really, really important. there are a number of ways that you can get legal advice if you haven't got a huge access to funds or if funding is an issue. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of them here really to give you some awareness, because access to funds is one of the main reasons that people don't get the advice that they really need legally. One of the ways that you can create access to funding is through something called litigation funding. But I'm going to be honest with you, it tends to exist for the higher net worth divorces, because the way that litigation funding works is that certain companies are willing to lend money for you to divorce, and the risk that they are taking is that you will get a certain settlement at the end from which they will be paid. So they're only willing to take that risk where the settlements are going to be at a level that they would get that kind of level of return back. They're typically expensive. You know, the level of interest that you pay them is typically fairly high, but it can be a route to getting some funding so that you can actually move things forward. So for some clients, there is no option. This is the only way that they can create access to legal advice. One area that I do point out to clients who really have no access to funds, and there aren't funds, you know, if there isn't a huge amount in the marital pot anyway, a lot of universities run legal clinics, and that can give you some access to some advice if you really need it and you have no way of paying for legal advice. And then the last one is legal aid services. If there is domestic abuse, that potentially might be an option, but it is limited. But getting input is really vital, because the decisions that you take and the actions that you take as a result of the financial abuse need to be qualified by what your lawyer says is going to be appropriate in these circumstances. I'm going to now talk a little bit about kind of what to do from the financial planning perspective as well. So financial knowledge is key. Knowledge is power. When you can get to a place where you understand financially your situation, it will make a huge difference. And it is not a big, huge mountain to climb. I think we have a tendency to make finances seem like a very complicated, different language. And you can learn what you need to financially fairly straightforwardly. So I want you to bear that in mind, that this isn't going to be a huge mountain. Places that you can gain that financial knowledge specifically around divorce would be my YouTube or the Stowe podcast. You can reach out to financial planners. There are many of us who deal just with divorce, but getting support from a financial planner in general is going to help you regain that financial literacy that is missing. And then let's talk about some practical steps. So we really want you to be able to gather as much information as possible. It's going to help on another number of levels. Where you are in the dark financially, it's going to be difficult for those around you to be able to support you unless they can start to gain a picture of what that financial situation might be. So if you can start to gather information financially, that is super useful, and that can come from any joint bank statements that might be in the home, anything that is joint that you have access to and you're able to open and have a look at. It's important to establish security. If you have been in a financially abusive relationship, the chances of it continuing are high. And so creating some boundaries and some security for yourself is important. And one of the places that you can visit to do that is your bank. There are the facilities for them to put some red flags on your account. And by that, I mean, they can make it known to bank staff that there has been financial abuse. Banks also sign up to a financial abuse directive, and so they will have a lot of support and guidance for what they can do in your own personal situation. But we also want you to be thinking about changing passwords on your email, on your online banking, on your credit reports, and really thinking about whether or not you freeze and close joint accounts. This is one of those things that it's really important to talk to your legal team about, because those decisions have knock-on effects. But ideally, getting to a place where that financial interaction is split is where we need to get to prevent further financial abuse. It's important that you access credit reports and get an understanding of what your current situation could look like. So things like Experian, and getting a picture of what that looks like. it can actually highlight things that you weren't aware of. So it's a really important step to take. And then a delinking checklist. That available is on the Surviving Economic Abuse website. And the checklist basically goes through all the things that you should think about that you might be connected financially with somebody else that would be worth delinking, and the ways of going about that. What support is available? So if we just kind of talk through kind of what else is out there and how we might be supporting you. So I touched on this. Your bank is likely part of the financial abuse codes. 99% of them are, and they have a whole process in place to deal with clients who are suffering financial abuse, and should be a really good first starting point. There's an excellent financial support line called Money Advice Plus, which is specifically for financial advice, and we'll share the phone number for that as well. And they're a really good port of call when you are finding that you just don't have anybody else to talk about money with. You don't have a legal team, you don't have a financial professional, and you really need some insights into how you're going to move that situation forward. And the next one I'm going to say is divorce coaches. If you haven't come across the term divorce coaches, you obviously haven't been watching Stowe's podcast, because they're often on here. But essentially, divorce coaches are there to help you navigate and gain support through divorce. Many of them have experience with economic abuse and domestic abuse. And I know I will share some of the details of some of them, but a lot of them are able to give you the emotional guidance and emotional input to be able to navigate the impact on your self-worth and the impact on your self-belief. It's really hard to make decisions during divorce if you are coming from a place where you've had financial abuse. You need to regain your ability to trust what decisions you make, and trust your thought process, and trust your logic. That is often diminished through the relationship that you've had, and through the kind of discussions that you've had, and the way that the other party has positioned your relationship with money, your ability to deal with money. And divorce coaches play a really key role in helping you navigate that better. If you are not in a position to be able to afford to work with divorce coaches, they're often very reasonably priced, but if you are not, you should follow their Instagram. These people are just so giving, and they want to share information, and they want to add value to you, and they want to be supportive to you. So most of them have Instagram channels. Most of them will be sharing free information, webinars, lives, all the stuff that you need to be able to get yourself back to a place of security. Here are just some of the support services that are out there as well, that are important in terms of navigating this financial abuse perspective, really. So we have Women's Aid, Surviving Economic Abuse, the website that I told you about. We've got a National Domestic Abuse Helpline. I'm going to put all of these in a PDF that will come out with this when it's published as well, Kate. Refuge Victim Support, Bright Sky, Gallup, who is specifically around LGBT and anti-abuse, but they're really good on financial abuse as well. There's a men's advice line, and we've got the Domestic Abuse Commissioner. So all of these places where we can get access to divorce support as well. My YouTube channel is here. So it's Willowbrook Lifestyle Financial Planning, and I cover an awful lot around finances and divorce and the stuff that you need to know. And then just my contact details here, and that's my Instagram at Willowbrook Financial Planning, which is a really good place for you to kind of reach out and follow a little bit more around my story and kind of the stuff that I'm sharing, what's happening with my clients. That is the presentation.
Lovely, Ceri, thank you very much. That was really cool. Slides are really nice, by the way.
Oh, were they okay?
Yeah, they were really good. My favourite page, I think, was the most recent, one of the most recent ones, which was the support services page, which gives a comprehensive list. When you're in a funk, the last thing you think of, or you just go to Google and you choose the top one, but having that sort of thing in your arsenal is really important. Even for for me as a practitioner, having it all in one place is a good thing, a bit of a go-to. So I'm going to pinch that one. Right, we've had some lovely chat, and we've got a few questions. I cannot tell you we're going to be answering all these questions beautifully, guys, but we're going to have a bit of a stab at kind of working through them. I think Ceri's given us some really great kind of practical tips as to how to be organised with the facts and the situation you're finding yourself in. One thing, if it's all right for me to jump in straight away and just talk about what happens in court proceedings when somebody fails to disclose their assets properly in something called a Form E. Now, just to put things in a bit of context here, if you're in court proceedings and you're doing a Form E, it means that you're getting a divorce, and it means that you are needing to get a financial settlement via the court route. This normally means that all negotiations on a voluntary basis have failed, and that can be for a variety of reasons. Somebody doesn't want to cooperate, somebody's gone to ground, somebody has wholly unrealistic aspirations, for example. So the scenario that we're talking about here is we've started court proceedings. The first stage of the process is to work out what's in the matrimonial pot. So what are the assets of the marriage? What does everybody have? In English law, we have the principle that we should enter into a deal ending our financial relationship on a level playing field. So this idea of full disclosure. The question that we have tonight is about what happens when somebody doesn't adhere to that rule of full and frank disclosure. The Form E itself is a big document. It's the same document that's used by the court, whether you got 50p or whether you got 50 million. And on the front, it's got some warnings. Okay, so it tells you basically, I'll take it actually from the question, I think. It talks about how if you've been found to be deliberately untruthful, then criminal proceedings may be brought against you. And it actually mentions the Fraud Act from 2006. It also points out the information given in the form must be confirmed by a statement of truth. It warns a person who's completing that disclosure form that proceedings for contempt of court may be brought against a person who makes or causes to be made a false statement in a document verified by a statement of truth. Okay, so they are pretty strong warnings on the front of this big document that you are submitting to court. Now, the question we've had tonight is really interesting because it's about what happens when people are dishonest in the form. Okay, I can't give you a fantastically great happy ending answer necessarily, because what we can do about non-disclosure depends on the evidence you have of it, if that makes sense. So generally, you will find that the failure to give full disclosure is dealt with in the family courts without criminal sanctions. Okay, normally the other party will be aware that there's been a failure to disclose properly. Normally there's a paper trail within the disclosure you've got already. If full disclosure isn't forthcoming, the court can make what we call adverse inferences, okay, based on the information that it's got so far. So it can say, well, this is all pointing towards X, Y, Z, and therefore make a final order regarding financial settlement on that evidence that's, that's pointing towards there being much more, for example, in a pot, or a much higher income than has been disclosed. Now, I am very aware of the fact that to get to that stage for a court to draw adverse inferences, you have normally gone through the whole process and you are normally at a final hearing. And obviously that is not something that everybody can afford to do. As I say, what the court can do will depend on what quality of evidence there is that undisclosed assets exist. Okay, the court does have the power to make PIK cost orders. The court does have the power to do something called a penal notice when someone has failed to disclose something that they've been ordered to produce for the court. Most of the time, I can say that to my knowledge, those who fail to give full disclosure don't get away with it. The process isn't perfect, and like the gentleman says in the question, I think it was, or was it another question elsewhere, about the ability of the courts to make references, refer matters to, for example, HMRC. I've not known that happen. I have heard of it happen, but it's never happened in the case that I've been dealing with in the past. There are a few articles on the internet about this sort of thing, but again, conduct is quite a difficult thing to determine within your financial settlement. I do appreciate I'm giving you a slightly hazy answer there, I'm afraid, but it does depend on the quality of the evidence you've got showing there's been non-disclosure. Okay.
Can I
So,
add something just briefly, Sarah? Just really briefly.
of course you can.
Just a little bit of hope, I suppose, because I work with this situation occurring fairly frequently. And this week, at the end of last week, you had a client whose ex was brought to a hearing for non-disclosure, continual non-disclosure, and the judge was just really, really great and actually pointed out the fact that he now has 3 weeks left. He's had 18 months, he's got 3 weeks left. He wasn't taking it, and if he doesn't act up and actually get the information through in the next 3 weeks, there would be fine, or there would be there'd be penal. So there would be actual action taken at the end of it. So it does, with your legal team on your side, you can push this to actually get some resolution. Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely. I think I'm very aware that whilst it's easy for me to say let's work together and nail them, legal costs are just so difficult for everybody nowadays, obviously. So I'm pretty sympathetic to that one. And also, when you found out there has been fraud in a situation, any kind of situation, your natural reaction is to go to the police, and you may find, depending on how well resourced your local police force is and what nature of the fraud is, you may not find that they're perhaps as helpful as you would expect them to be. I'm sympathetic to that as well. Ceri, is there anything in the questions that you picked through that you thought I want to snap that one up?
I'm just looking now. There's a lot of them that are very legal. So I'm looking in the actual Q&A. Most of those are legal ones. And I've got one here. What about life insurance? Just discovered I'm not a beneficiary and I'm paying for it, I think is what she's saying. And then the next one after says, I company equity. How do I find it out? How do I so in terms of the life insurance side of things, and not being a beneficiary of it, and she's paying for it, really it's going to be part of the actual decisions that are made around how the divorce is processed anyway, Sarah. I think this is probably a legal one, because one of the decisions that will be made is how that policy is going to be dealt with during divorce, whether it's going to continue, who's going to be paying for it, whether different life insurance is going to be needed. From a financial planning point of view, the chances are that the life cover that you need is different to what you've currently got in place, because circumstances have changed. So probably need to review and amend whatever life cover exists, in which case there are ways, if needed, that you can be a beneficiary on life cover. And if you are paying for it, it's called life of another. So if you need life cover that pays out in the event that he dies or the other person dies, but you're paying for it, it's called life of another, and it means that you've got control that the premiums are going to be still paid, but the person actually insured is the one who it's their death that's important that you're actually getting a payout for. So there are ways that we can actually put that in place, and it would all really depend on what you're needing and actually analysing that.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you're paying for an insurance policy that someone else is going to benefit from, the other party should do a reciprocal arrangement so you benefit from something they're paying from. I appreciate that's a nice simple answer, not always possible because it depends on people's characters and resources in general. But yeah, sometimes it's a slightly common sense approach to these sorts of things, isn't it? What's good for one of you, it should be forthcoming from the other side as well.
Yeah. Just going to read the questions to see if there's any not legal ones while we're going through.
Yeah. Just while you're having a bit of a read through, somebody's raised a question about Talata proceedings. Talata is Trusts of Land and the Appointment of Trustees Act from, I think it's 1996, I hope I got that right. And it's generally a piece of legislation that's used when you have property but you're not married, is how we as family lawyers tend to be using that statute. I'm not sure whether or not the question here regarding an ex who's bought a property behind someone else's back without telling them is necessarily something that would be dealt with under Talata. But as always, go and get your situation checked out by a lawyer. The majority of lawyers out there will always do a free initial appointment, so take advantage of it. Go along with the situation. If you've got a child, if there is a possibility, if there is sufficient resources, you might even be talking about something called a Schedule 1 application under the Children Act if the child is still a minor. It's always good to check your situation out. If you're needing a lump sum to rehouse yourself and there is resources in that relationship, or in somehow, if there's resources that your ex has, always good to get that checked out. Life insurance, we've dealt with that. Huge sympathy with the lady who's having difficulties regarding getting her husband to engage. He's ignoring court orders. It is a really difficult process, but once you're in the court timetable, so to speak, you should be getting, there should be an end date. The court doesn't just allow matters to fall by the wayside. If you've started what we call Form A, an application for a financial order, you will get one in the end, but you do have to follow the court timetable through. If he is ignoring court orders and he's not producing items to the court, look up a penal notice and apply to court for penal notice, so there can be a threat that he could be thrown to prison if he doesn't produce what he needs to produce when he has been ordered to produce it. And also, let's not forget costs orders. The courts have the power to order a cost order against somebody who's behaving badly, and that cost order obviously would be in your favour. So that's an important thing to remember. Do child maintenance payments continue when a child goes to university? No, it finishes at the end of secondary education. There is mechanisms for securing financial support for tertiary education. It's going to depend on what resources are available, but yeah, contact a lawyer, have a free appointment, and they'll talk you through that. But yes, your child maintenance and the child maintenance service would normally finish upon conclusion of secondary education. If you are divorcing, for example, and you're getting a financial settlement and somebody is willing to agree to providing financial support during tertiary education, then that can be included within a consent order, depending on the age of the child. It might be something that's quite specific, even down to the actual sum that they're agreeing to provide, or it could just be something general in principle, in terms of that both parties agree to discharge the costs of tuition and accommodation for university equally as and when the time comes, type thing. Have you spotted a question, Ceri?
Just a couple of points really that I want to kind of pick up. So absolutely, men can be victim of economic abuse by women. There is no demographic that can't be victim of economic abuse, and we see it in kind of every single aspect. We also have some questions around access to free advice, like mine and like yours, Sarah, and kind of where people can reach out for that. I have kind of mentioned it already, but legal clinics can be a way of getting some free advice if you really, really have no access to funds whatsoever. And then in terms of financial advice, most financial advisors will give you half an hour of their time, no problem. It's really quite common for us to just kind of signpost these things. So from most financial advisors, they will do that as well. And your bank is a really good place to go as a starting point with this type of thing as well. They normally do have an economic abuse expert within the branch, and that can be a really good place. Did you want to pick anything up around that at all, Sarah?
No, that's great. I was engrossed in a question about third-party disclosure.
Just another one I want to pick up. Somebody's put a litigation loan is very dangerous, particularly when your spouse is dragging things out. The interest is eye-watering, and I'm actually saying that. She's written that, but I'm saying that as well. The interest is eye-watering. They are expensive, but sometimes they are a route to getting what you need. And actually that can be worth what you're paying for them. But I would get somebody to talk through the terms and conditions of them and just make sure you're comfortable. The interest rates are eye-watering because of the risk that they're taking, typically.
Yeah, but absolutely, it's proportionality, isn't it? You've hit the nail on the head really there. You know, if someone's being so awkward that you're not getting anywhere in proceedings, but if you can issue court proceedings with the aid of a litigation loan, and it means that you're getting half the house and you have the ability to rehouse yourself, then it's the loan is worth it, because you're either walking away with nothing, or you could be having a house for 150,000 or 200,000. You know, it's a proportionality exercise. It's daunting. I do appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's difficult.
it is difficult. Just said that her ex removed her from the Halifax joint account without her permission, but when she tried to do the same on the Barclay ones, they wouldn't let you. It's linked to who started the account initially. There's like a main account holder, so one of them, probably both of them were him, so he's considered the one who actually owns that account, so it can be tricky. It's one of those situations where if you can talk about the general economic abuse, it can help you create a new situation. I've had that for some of my clients, and what actually happened in the bank is that they created a new sole account and moved funds. So they couldn't do anything about the joint one. They were able to put a red flag so no overdrafts went on it, and then a new sole account was opened, and funds moved there. There's an issue if you go moving funds around, Sarah, so do talk. Sarah will, want to make sure that her clients are having that conversation, but that is a way of going about it.
Okay. Just picking up the last question that's popped into the Q&A about someone's having difficulty in an ongoing court case. Just want to deal with the last question that says, can I be forced to a final hearing? If you're already in court proceedings, the court timetable is running, and if a final hearing has been ordered, it will take place. You will need to engage in that. Someone's concerned regarding conduct of their lawyer. Yes, you can go down your own lawyer's complaints procedure with the firm, and obviously the legal ombudsman exists, as we all know, but you will need to do the complaints procedure via the firm that you are instructing at present, before you can go to the ombudsman. But if you're in court proceedings and you're looking at a final hearing, I'd suggest get on and talking to your lawyers, and express your unhappiness if you're not quite sure what's going on, or how things have got to where they've got to, so you can get yourself straight and get yourself prepared for that hearing. Why is it possible to go straight to final hearing? I would love to go straight to final hearing in lots of cases.
Yes, that would be a dream. Just put something actually that I am aware of, but I'm not aware of the solution. But I do know that I could go and find it. So her ex uses the global maintenance, and her ex pays global maintenance, and when it lands in her bank account, he's using really abusive words in that reference box, like maintenance scam or scammer, and she's complained to her bank, and they said there's nothing they can do. Actually, this was something that was raised really recently, and I saw a load of posts around this, and I'm sure that there was a resolution. So it's not top of my mind now, but it is familiar. So I will find that out, and I'll make sure that we get an update on the stuff that comes out around it, because it was flagged with the banks as being a really big issue. I believe what I can recall the outcome was that they blocked certain words, and I would have thought scam and scammer was some of the words that they would have blocked, but I will find out, and we'll shed some more light on that for you.
That's that's really mean, isn't it?
Yeah,
really low. The
actual case in situation, the person wasn't even paying any maintenance. He just used to send her like 1 penny so that he could write something really nasty.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's harsh. Yeah, I have seen some fairly awful descriptions over the years, I must admit. Crikey, it's bonkers. It's bonkers. Right, well, where are we? We're 6:30, everybody. There's been, we could do another session on this. I'd love to have you back, actually, Ceri, if you fancy doing another one later in the year, because it's clear we've got lots of people who have lots to say, but also lots of trauma out there and people in difficult situations. And I hate cutting everybody off, but we did say 6:30 would be the end point. I'm afraid. Let us know what you think about obviously tonight. Let us know if you'd like us to do another session like this, so we can carry on and revisit some more of these questions and what have you. Ceri, I've had a really interesting evening. Thank you very much.
You are so welcome.
We really could do we could do a week's worth of actually sessions on this topic, couldn't we?
We could, yeah, we really could. There's so much, and actually the questions are really useful to prepare for another session as well. So it'd be really good to get those afterwards, Kate, so that I can think about really how we get some of the more specific things in there as well.
Yeah, awesome. It's funny. It's evenings like tonight where I do feel, obviously being a divorce lawyer, I do feel that some situations the law does let us down. The law is slow to develop. It's slow to help people who are victims of financial abuse. And obviously we have a cracking legal system. Other countries in the world seek to emulate our legal system. It is a first world legal system. But when you're going through it, sometimes it doesn't feel like that. I'm very aware of that. I'm very aware of its failings. But hopefully we've given people the means to find better support as they're going through it this evening. And like I said, lawyers offer free appointments. Get on the phone, book yourself in with one, get the help that you can, or get a steer to start with, and you know, dial into the support and go from there. Really.
I just wanted to say, as it's just put there, it's reassuring to hear the things I've struggled with acknowledged, and it's not me, it's not you, it's not you, and I want everybody to know that here. That's a really good way to end it.
Yeah, awesome. I feel we should go out for a glass of wine with everybody now.
I know. I wish.
Lovely. Anyway, Ceri, I'll see you soon. Thank you very much for sharing everything tonight with us and giving us your time. I really appreciate it. Okay, take care. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye. Bye.